Imagine, imagine you just found a gold ring out in a field somewhere.
Okay, yeah, like a magic ring.
Yeah, exactly. But it's not just a normal piece of jewelry. When you put this ring on, you become completely invisible,
Oh, wow.
right? Like no one can see you. There's no police, no cameras, literally no social consequences whatsoever.
That is a pretty wild scenario.
It really is. And it makes you wonder, what is the very first thing you do? Because today we're opening up a source document that actually argues that with that ring on, every single one of us deep down would eventually become a complete monster.
Yeah, it's a super dark premise. And, it forces us to ask a really uncomfortable question about human nature.
Right.
Like, are we actually good people, or are we just, terrified of getting caught?
Exactly. And that right there is the foundational anxiety we are going to explore today. Welcome to a brand new deep dive. We are looking at this really comprehensive analysis of one of the most famous philosophical texts in Western history, which is Plato's Republic.
It is a massive piece of work.
It is. And our mission for this deep dive, for you listening right now, is to kind of rescue Plato from those dusty, intimidating shelves of political science.
Yeah, people hear Plato and they immediately think of, boring lectures.
Right, they tune out. But this analysis we're looking at proves that this isn't just some old book about ancient Greek laws. It's actually a living, breathing map of human psychology.
It really is.
We're going to figure out whether justice is just this social fiction, like a fairy tale we tell ourselves to keep society running, or if it is the literal core architecture of our happiness.
And to get to the bottom of that, the source lays out this incredible narrative arc. I mean, Plato doesn't start with easy answers.
No, not at all.
He starts with these totally unresolved debates about justice, and he scales it all the way up to this cosmic framework of the afterlife. So we move from the gritty, cynical reality of human selfishness all the way up to the ultimate destiny of the soul.
It's a huge journey, but to understand the soul, we have to look at it a bit differently, right? Usually when we try to figure out why we make choices, we just look inward.
Right, we treat the mind like a tiny sealed-off room.
Exactly. But think of this deep dive like taking a tangled ball of yarn, which is the human mind, and projecting its shadow onto a massive wall. And that shadow takes the shape of an entire city.
Oh, I like that analogy.
Yeah, so by looking at the giant city, we can suddenly understand the tiny knots in our own brains.
And that is the exact structural strategy Plato uses.
Okay.
But before he can build that giant city or map out the harmony of the mind, he kind of has to clear the ground first.
Right.
He has to face this devastating, incredibly cynical attack on the very concept of morality itself. So the whole intellectual architecture of this journey begins with a major existential crisis.
Let's set the scene for that crisis because it's so dramatic. The source details how this whole debate starts off as a classic Socratic dialogue.
Yeah, very polite.
Exactly. Socrates is just hanging out with these wealthy guys, Cephalus and Polemarchus, and they're having this nice, comfortable chat about what it means to be a good person.
It's all very surface level stuff,
Yeah.
You pay your debts, you tell the truth, you help your friends. Standard polite society rules.
Right, exactly. And then, out of nowhere, the door is basically kicked off its hinges by this guy named Thrasymachus.
Oh yeah, Thrasymachus. He is a sophist, so he's a paid teacher of rhetoric, and he just injects this jarring, violent realism right into the conversation.
He totally crashes the party.
He does. He shatters this polite paradigm by asserting that justice is nothing more than the advantage of the stronger.
The advantage of the stronger. So he is basically saying that all our moral frameworks, all our laws about right and wrong, they're completely artificial.
Completely made up.
Yeah, like they are just constructs engineered by the ruling elites to subjugate everyone else.
For Thrasymachus, justice is just an instrumental fiction. I mean, think about how a shepherd cares for his sheep.
Okay, yeah.
The shepherd doesn't protect the sheep because he loves them or because it's the right thing to do morally. He protects them so he can eventually fleece them or slaughter them for profit.
Wow, that is bleak.
It is. But Thrasymachus argues that rulers view citizens exactly the same way. The laws they pass, which they label as justice, are simply mechanisms to maximize their own power and wealth.
So being a just citizen, in his mind, just means you're being a naive tool. You're just letting yourself be exploited by the strong.
Exactly. So injustice, in his view, is actually the rational choice. If you can get away with it, it's profitable.
He's basically saying that grand-scale injustice, like being a tyrant who steals an entire country, is the true mark of intelligence.
Yeah, That's his core argument.
And Socrates tries to fight back against this, right? He uses these analogies of different crafts and professions.
He does, yeah. Socrates argues that a true ruler, much like a true doctor or a ship captain, seeks the benefit of their subjects, not themselves.
Like a doctor's craft is aimed at healing the patient, not just getting rich.
Right. But the text notes that this counter-argument completely falls flat. It doesn't work because it relies on this super idealized version of profession.
Yeah, I see.
Yeah, Thrasymachus essentially just rolls his eyes and points out that in the real world, doctors and rulers still demand to be paid. The underlying selfish motivation is always there.
So the challenge is just unresolved, and Socrates is kind of left in a state of paralysis.
He's totally left speechless.
And because Socrates' preliminary arguments are so weak, two other guys in the room step up, Glaucon and Adeimantus.
Yeah, Plato's actual brothers, interestingly enough.
Oh, really? That's cool. Well, they aren't cynical like Thrasymachus, but they want Socrates to do better. They want a real answer.
They revive the critique with way more philosophical rigor. Glaucon sets this trap by introducing a taxonomy of goods. He basically breaks down everything we desire into 3 categories.
This is such a crucial framework. So what are the categories?
Okay, so first, Glaucon says there are things we desire entirely for their own sake, like harmless pleasures or just feeling joy.
Right, you don't expect a payout. The experience itself is the reward.
Exactly. Then there's the second category, things we desire only for their consequences, like taking bitter medicine or working a really difficult job.
The act itself is awful, but the result, like your health or your paycheck, makes it worth it.
Right. And finally, there is the highest class of goods. These are things we desire both for their intrinsic value and for their extrinsic rewards.
Like being healthy. It feels good internally to be healthy, and it also externally prevents you from dying.
Perfect example, yeah. And Glaucon says if Socrates wants to truly defend justice, he must prove it belongs to that highest class.
He has to prove it's desirable for its internal state and for its external rewards. But people usually only treat justice like that bitter medicine, right?
Right, we only follow rules because we want the paycheck of a good reputation, or we just want to avoid going to jail.
So to isolate justice from its social utility, Glaucon brings up that thought experiment we talked about at the very beginning, the ring of Gyges.
Yeah, Glaucon tells this story of a humble shepherd who discovers a golden ring on a corpse inside a chasm. He puts it on, goes to a meeting of the other shepherds, and discovers that when he turns the setting of the ring inward, he becomes completely invisible.
It's basically the ultimate superpower. He is suddenly stripped of all fear of social exposure.
Right. There can be no legal retribution, no reputational damage at all.
And what does this perfectly average, seemingly decent guy do with absolute freedom?
Well, he doesn't go fight crime, that's for sure.
No. He promptly sneaks into the palace, seduces the queen, assassinates the king, and seizes the entire kingdom. He just goes full villain instantly.
And Glaucon's conclusion from this is psychologically devastating.
Yeah.
He suggests that no human being has a nature so strong that they would stay on the path of justice if they had this ring.
Like no one would keep their hands off their neighbor's property if they could take whatever they wanted with zero consequences.
Exactly. Glaucon is suggesting that morality is merely a societal contract born of weakness.
We're only good because we're afraid of being victims ourselves.
Yeah.
We agree not to hurt each other simply because we don't want to get hurt. It's just a compromise.
Yeah. And then Adeimantus piles on too. He points out that even our parents, our religions, and our cultures don't actually praise justice itself.
What do you mean?
They praise the reputation of justice. Like parents don't tell their kids, be just because it's a beautiful state of mind.
Right. They say, be a good person so you get a good job, find a good spouse, and the gods don't punish you.
Exactly. Which leaves Socrates with an absolute mandate. He must completely isolate the just person. He has to strip the just person of all positive reputation and all external rewards.
So Socrates is challenged to imagine a scenario where a perfectly just man is falsely accused of the worst crimes imaginable.
Right. He is scorned, he's tortured, and he is ultimately executed, all while being completely innocent.
Meanwhile, he has to imagine the perfectly unjust man, a ruthless tyrant who is so good at manipulation that everyone thinks he's a saint.
Right. The tyrant enjoys the highest honors, massive wealth, and the praise of the entire city.
And Socrates has to prove that the tortured, innocent guy is actually happier than the billionaire tyrant.
Yes.
I mean, that is a massive hill to climb. But let's pause here for a second. Does Plato actually believe we are all just inherently corrupt, waiting for a magic ring to let our dark side out?
is a fair question.
Because I think about modern internet anonymity. When people have a screen name and a cartoon avatar, when they are basically wearing a digital ring of gauges, their moral guardrails just vanish.
Oh, absolutely.
People will send death threats to a stranger over a movie review. They say things they would never, ever say to someone's face in a grocery store. Is Plato saying that toxic comment section is our true, unfiltered nature?
Well, Socrates doesn't deny the temptation. He absolutely recognizes the terrifying allure of the ring and the reality of that dark human impulse.
So he agrees with them.
Not exactly. His response isn't to say, yes, we are all secretly monsters. Instead, he realizes he has to completely redefine what makes a human soul happy.
Okay, how so?
He has to prove that the internal state of the just man's soul is structurally superior. He has to show that a mind aligned with justice is so inherently healthy and resilient that the man being tortured is fundamentally better off than the tyrant.
Because the tyrant is secretly enslaved by his own endless paranoia and insatiable desires.
Exactly. He has to detach happiness entirely from external rewards.
But how do you even begin to prove that? Looking into the invisible mechanics of a single tortured soul to prove it's structurally healthier than a king's soul seems impossible. You can't put a feeling under a microscope.
You're right. It is impossible to observe directly. The mechanics of a single human mind are too microscopic, they're too tangled, which is why Socrates makes this really ingenious methodological pivot.
He changes the scale.
He does.
Right, and this is where we go back to that shadow on the wall analogy. This pivot just blows my mind. Socrates basically says, if we can't see justice in a single person because the letters are too small, let's write the word in larger letters.
Yes, let's build a utopia.
Let's literally build a city from scratch in our minds.
And this structural strategy is the foundation of the entire text. It gives rise to the architectural design of Kallipolis, which translates to the beautiful, ideal city.
Kallipolis, got it.
By constructing this city-state in their imaginations, Plato believes they can observe justice functioning on a macro level. It becomes visible in the form of laws, institutions, and classes.
And once they define what makes the giant city just, they can map that exact same structure directly back onto the individual human mind.
Exactly. The source refers to this concept as the isomorphism of soul and state.
Isomorphism. Iso meaning equal, morph meaning shape. So the city is shaped exactly like the human mind.
You got it.
Okay, let's really unpack this blueprint of Kallipolis. The source says the foundational rule, the absolute bedrock of this utopia, is the principle of specialization. What does that actually look like on the ground?
Well, it stems from a very basic observation. Human beings are not self-sufficient. None of us can survive entirely on our own.
Right, I definitely can't build my own house or farm my own food.
Exactly. Society originates from our mutual vulnerabilities and dependencies. You need a farmer to grow your food, a builder to construct your shelter, a weaver to make your clothes.
Makes sense.
So the principle of specialization dictates that each individual must fulfill the single economic or social function to which their inherent nature is best suited.
Oh, so the farmer only farms, the builder only builds.
Right. You do not dabble. You do the one thing you are naturally equipped to do, and you do it for the benefit of the whole.
Total efficiency through a strict division of labor. So the society starts out very simple. The text calls this early stage the city of pigs, right?
Yes, it does.
Which sounds like an insult, but it just means a basic, primitive society focused entirely on survival. But humans being humans, we are never satisfied with just survival.
No, we always want more.
Right, we don't just want bread and water. We want couches and perfumes and pastries and art.
And that desire for luxury is the catalyst for complexity. As the city expands to meet the luxury demands of its citizens, it inevitably requires more territory and more resources.
Which means it will eventually have to take a slice of its neighbor's land.
Exactly. And that necessity breeds war. Therefore, to acquire and defend that territory, the city can no longer rely on farmers picking up pitchforks.
They need a real army.
Right. It must develop a professional, highly trained military apparatus.
And boom, society fractures into classes. You can't just have producers anymore. You need soldiers. And if you have soldiers, you need commanders.
It's an inevitable evolution.
The source details how this evolution eventually splits the state into three distinct socio-political classes. And true to the isomorphism, Plato maps these three city classes directly to a tripartite model of the human mind.
This mapping is incredible.
Let's dig into it, because understanding these three parts is the key to understanding everything else Plato has to say.
Absolutely. The structural health of both the city and the mind depends entirely on maintaining a strict functional hierarchy among these three parts. Let's start at the very top.
Okay, at the top of the state, we have the guardians, or the rulers. In the human mind, they represent the psychic element of reason.
Right. Their primary virtue is wisdom. And to keep everyone in their place, the rulers propagate this noble lie, a foundational myth that tells the citizens they were all born directly from the earth, but the gods mix different metals into their souls.
And the rulers are told they have gold in their souls.
Gold for the rulers. So why is wisdom up top?
Because wisdom resides in this ruling class. They possess knowledge of the whole state. They don't just know how to farm or how to fight. They understand the grand design and what is best for the collective.
So in the human mind, this is your rational faculty.
Yes, it is the part of you that calculates long-term good. It's the voice in your head that tells you not to eat the entire cake or to save money for retirement, overriding those immediate destructive impulses.
Okay, so that's the top. Then in the middle of the hierarchy, we have the auxiliaries. These are the soldiers, the professional military.
Right.
In the mind, they represent spirit. Their virtue is courage, and their metallic metaphor is silver. And the spirited part of the soul is absolutely crucial because reason alone is just calculation. It doesn't have motive force.
Can't make you actually do anything.
Exactly. Spirit acts as the emotional enforcer of reason. When your reason dictates you should do something difficult, like standing up to a bully or studying for an exam instead of going to a party, it is your spirit, your internal courage, that actually gets you off the couch to do it.
Oh, that makes so much sense. So in the city, the auxiliaries preserve the state's laws and ideological doctrines against external and internal rebellions.
Right. They are the muscle that enforces the brain's decisions.
Got it. And finally, at the massive base of the pyramid, making up the vast majority of the city, we have the producers, the farmers, the merchants, the craftsmen.
The foundation.
Right. They represent our appetite, our raw desires. Their virtue is moderation, and they are made of bronze or iron.
But we have to be very precise about how moderation functions here. Moderation is not a virtue restricted only to the worker class.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the workers aren't the only ones who need to be moderate. Moderation is a systemic harmony. It is a mutual agreement across all three classes and across all three psychic elements regarding who should rule and who should obey.
Ah, I see. So the workers agree to be ruled by the guardians, just as your appetites must agree to be ruled by your reason.
Precisely.
So justice isn't about being fair in the modern sense at all. It has nothing to do with equal rights or equal distribution of wealth.
Not even a little bit.
Plato defines justice as doing one's own work and not meddling with what is not one's own. It's an internal structural equilibrium. Reason rules, spirit defends, appetite obeys.
A state is just when each class performs its structural duties without overstepping its bounds. And an individual is just when their internal hierarchy is perfectly aligned.
So justice is not a specific external action you take. It is a state of objective psychic health.
That's the perfect way to put it.
I try to picture this like a modern corporation. You have the CEO, which is reason they set the long-term vision for the company.
Okay.
You have security and HR, which is spirit. They enforce the rules, maintain the culture, and protect the assets. And you have sales and production. The appetite, they drive the daily revenue. They are constantly hungry for more deals, more growth.
That is an excellent framework.
Right. And if the sales department tries to act like the CEO and dictates the entire company's 10-year strategy based purely on getting this quarter's commission check, the company will eventually collapse.
Absolutely.
Sales is vital, but they cannot steer the ship. They have to stay in their lane.
When appetite takes the steering wheel, whether in a corporation, a city, or a human mind, disaster follows. The system loses its long-term vision and becomes a slave to immediate gratification.
But I have to push back here for a second.
Go for it.
Telling an entire population that they are biologically destined to be bronze or gold and that they must stay in their lane forever, that sounds less like harmony and more like a rigid, inescapable caste system.
It does sound like that to modern ears, yes.
How does Plato justify this lack of mobility? Because modern society is built on the idea that anyone can be anything if they work hard enough. Plato's system feels incredibly oppressive.
Well, to understand his justification, we have to recognize that he is fundamentally not concerned with modern democratic ideals of equality.
He doesn't care about equality.
No. He is concerned with objective structural health. Allowing an appetite-driven person to rule the state or allowing your own raw desires to dictate your life isn't freedom. To Plato, it's a disease.
A disease. Wow.
Think of the human body. Your stomach is incredibly important for digesting food. But if your stomach suddenly demanded to do the job of your brain, your body would die.
Yeah, that would be bad.
Right. A sick body isn't free to be sick, it's failing. A soul or a city ruled by appetite is fundamentally failing. Mobility between classes only happens if a rare child is born with a different metal in their soul than their parents. But once their nature is identified, they are locked into their function.
Okay, so he's diagnosing a condition, not trying to win a human rights award. But if you're going to build this perfect, rigidly structured society, how do you keep the gold class, the rulers, from becoming corrupt?
That is the million-dollar question.
Right. Because history shows us that people with absolute power do not stay perfect for long. They start hoarding wealth, they give all the best jobs to their friends, they bend the laws to protect their children. How does Kallipolis survive human greed?
This is where Plato implements unimaginably radical reforms. He realizes that conventional politics and polite laws won't keep the ruling class pure. He has to completely eradicate what the source calls private anchors.
Private anchors, what are those?
Private anchors are all the personal attachments that historically splinter a leader's loyalty away from the public good and toward their own private interests.
And to do this, Socrates has to defend his blueprint against three massive waves of intellectual opposition. These are ideas so radical that Socrates expects to be laughed out of the room.
He literally calls them waves because he thinks they might drown him in ridicule.
Let's look at the first two waves, which are aimed directly at abolishing those private anchors. What is wave one?
The first wave is the assertion of the absolute equality of the sexes regarding education and governance.
Which, we have to remember, in ancient Athens, women were largely confined to the domestic sphere. They didn't vote, they didn't hold office. Suggesting women could rule the city must have sounded like absolute insanity to his audience.
Completely scandalous.
But his logic for this is fascinating. He argues that a soul with a golden disposition, a soul dominated by reason, is equally capable of manifesting in a female body as in a male body. Reason doesn't have a gender.
Precisely. While Plato acknowledges obvious physical and biological differences in reproduction and physical strength, he insists that the cross-section of psychic temperaments is identical across sexes.
A woman can be just as courageous or just as wise as a man.
Exactly. Therefore, women who are identified as having gold or silver souls must be brought into the guardian class. And crucially, they must receive the exact same gymnastics, musical, and military training as the men. They train together, they fight together, and they rule together.
That is incredibly progressive for the time. But then we hit the second wave, and this is where Plato goes completely off the deep end. It feels like a terrifying dystopian sci-fi novel.
Oh, it gets very dark.
The second wave is the complete abolition of the nuclear family and private property for the guardian class.
Yes. To eliminate familial nepotism and tribalism, Plato strips the elite ruling class of everything personal. They are strictly forbidden from owning private wealth, land, or houses.
Nothing at all.
Nothing. They live together in communal barracks, they eat in mess halls, and they receive their basic sustenance from the producer class. They are essentially monks with absolute political power.
They own nothing. But it gets so much darker than that. To control the population and ensure that only the best traits are passed on, he introduces a system of state-controlled eugenics.
Yeah, this is the part that really shocks people.
And he disguises it as a random religious lottery so the citizens don't realize they are being bred like livestock. The rulers secretly use a complex mathematical formula called the nuptial number to calculate optimal genetic pairings.
Right. They rig the lotteries during these highly regulated mating festivals, so the strongest men are paired with the strongest women.
And the most chilling aspect of this reform is what happens after the children are born. The text explicitly states that the wives of the guardians are to be common, their children are to be common, and no parent is to know their own child, nor any child their parent.
The moment a child is born to the guardian class, it is immediately taken away by state officials and reared in anonymous, state-run creches.
Wait, taking babies away at birth, I have to stop here.
I know, it's brutal.
The source argues he's doing this to cultivate a hyper-empathetic collective consciousness. He wants a state that feels pain and joy as a single, unified organism. If one person stubs their toe, the whole city feels it.
That's the theory, yes.
But doesn't ripping a newborn child from its mother's arms completely destroy the fundamental human capacity for empathy that he's supposedly trying to cultivate? You can't just mandate love via a rigged state lottery and anonymous barracks. This sounds like an alien hive mind, not a functional human society.
You are echoing the profound horror many scholars feel when confronting Book V. It forces us to ask, can human nature actually be reprogrammed to this extent?
I mean, I don't think so.
Plato believed that personal love, that intense exclusionary loyalty you feel for your specific spouse or your specific child, inherently and inevitably fragments your civic loyalty.
Because you put them first.
Exactly. If a ruler has a son, they will always eventually prioritize the success of their bloodline over the good of the state. They will embezzle money to give their kid a better life.
So by abolishing the nuclear family, by making everyone in the guardian class family in a broad, anonymous sense, he theoretically forces universal civic duty.
Right. A guardian looks at a younger citizen and thinks, that could literally be my biological child, and therefore treats everyone with parental duty. He is trying to surgically remove the primary biological incentives for systemic political corruption.
So his cure for political corruption is to amputate the nuclear family. It's a brutal, terrifying logic.
It is.
But let's follow the thought experiment. Even if you somehow construct this radical, property-less, family-less society, who on earth is actually qualified to lead it? Who has the mental software to run this massive, intrusive machine without going completely mad with power?
And that brings us to the third and most formidable way of confronting Socrates, the paradox of political authority. Socrates must answer how this theoretical utopia could ever be actualized in the messy physical world.
And Plato drops this historical bombshell, wave 3. He says that cities will never rest from evils and the human race will never find peace until philosophers become kings or until the kings of this world become true philosophers.
It is a radical demand for the synthesis of pure intellect and absolute political power.
But to justify this, Plato has to redefine what a philosopher actually is, right?
Yes. He draws a really sharp contrast between genuine philosophers, whom he calls lovers of truth, and the people who usually hold power, the politicians and demagogues. He calls them lovers of opinion, or lovers of sights and sounds.
And to illustrate this tragic misalignment between actual expertise and democratic governance, the source breaks down one of Plato's most brilliant and, frankly, cynical metaphors, the allegory of the ship of state.
Oh, this one is so good.
Let's dig into this because it feels incredibly relevant today.
Okay, so imagine a massive ship navigating a dangerous sea. The ship owner represents the democratic populace, the voting public.
The people.
Right. This owner is physically powerful. He owns the ship, after all, but he is short-sighted, he's a bit deaf, and he lacks any real knowledge of the technical art of navigation.
Okay, so the owner is the public. Strong, but essentially clueless about how to actually sail the vessel they own.
Exactly. Then you have the crew. These are the politicians, the pundits, the demagogues. They are constantly mutinying and fighting each other for control of the helm.
Let me guess, they don't know how to sail either.
Crucially, none of them have ever actually studied the art of navigation. They don't know how to sail at all. Instead, they spend all their time figuring out how to manipulate the ship owner.
Ah.
They use rhetoric, they use drugs, they use political machinations to win his favor. Anyone who helps them seize power is praised as a skilled mariner, while anyone who gets in their way is thrown overboard.
Right. It's just a popularity contest. It's all about who runs the best campaign, who gives the best speeches, who throws the best parties for the ship owner.
Completely.
It's like passengers on a commercial airplane mutinying, locking the actual trained pilot out of the cockpit, and then holding a vote for a new pilot based entirely on which passenger hands out the best free snacks.
That is a brilliant way to picture it.
And while they're all arguing over who gets to pass out the peanuts, the plane is in a nosedive.
That is a perfect translation of the allegory. Meanwhile, in Plato's story, the true navigator, the philosopher, is sitting quietly on the deck, completely ignored.
Just watching the chaos.
Right. This is the person who actually understands that a safe voyage requires precise knowledge of the seasons, the stars, the winds, and celestial movements. But because the true navigator won't participate in the chaotic, violent mutiny to flatter the shipowner, the crew dismisses him as a useless, stargazing idler.
It's a devastating critique of Athenian democracy, and frankly, it stings to hear it today. But hold on, I have to challenge Plato here.
Okay.
Plato assumes there is an objective mathematical truth to politics, just like there is an objective truth to star navigation. You either know how to read the stars or you crash the ship into a reef.
Yes, he does.
But who decides what objective truth is in human society? Isn't politics inherently subjective? Isn't it messy, about balancing competing human needs, compromising on budgets, and debating values? A philosopher king sounds less like a navigator and more like an authoritarian dictator who just happens to be really good at math.
You are hitting on the absolute core friction of Plato's political philosophy. Plato unequivocally rejects the idea that politics is subjective.
Really?
Completely. He rejects the idea that morality is up for democratic debate. For Plato, moral and political wisdom are rooted in objective metaphysical truths. Just as 2 plus 2 equals 4, there is a mathematically precise answer to what makes a society just.
So it's not an opinion, it's a fact to him.
Exactly. Governance is a technical craft. Therefore, the skills needed to win a democratic election, like flattering the crowd, manipulating the passions of what he calls the great beast of the public, are the exact traits that disqualify someone from ruling.
Wait, really?
Yes, if you are good at winning popularity contests, you are, by definition, an expert in manipulating opinions, not discovering objective truth.
Wow. If you are good at elections, you are disqualified from actual leadership. That is a heavy, almost anti-democratic thought.
It is entirely anti-democratic.
So, if true leadership requires this objective metaphysical knowledge, how does a philosopher king actually acquire it? Because you don't learn the absolute truth of the universe by just hanging around the marketplace or scrolling the news. You have to leave the physical world behind entirely.
Precisely. To explain how a philosopher achieves this, the text shifts its focus from political philosophy to epistemology, which is the theory of knowledge.
Okay.
Plato asserts that the ultimate object of all philosophical knowledge is the form of the good.
The form of the good. The source describes the good as being to the mind what the physical sun is to the eyes. It's the ultimate source of truth and the cause of existence for everything else in the universe.
Yes. And to explain how the human mind reaches this ultimate sun, Plato formalizes the journey through the analogy of the divided line. This is basically a map of human cognition.
Let's walk through this map.
Imagine a vertical line divided into 2 unequal parts. The lower, smaller section is the visible or sensory realm. This is everything we can see, touch, and feel. It is governed entirely by mere opinions.
Okay, the physical world.
Right. The upper, larger section is the intelligible realm. This is the realm of abstract thought, governed by immutable reality and genuine, absolute knowledge.
Let's walk through the friction of moving up this line. Because it's not an easy journey, the source breaks the line down into 4 specific cognitive stages. At the very bottom, stage 1, we have illusion.
This is the lowest possible level of cognition. The mind here perceives mere shadows, reflections, and artistic representations. It is secondhand reality.
Like what?
If we use the example of a circle, this stage is like looking at a distorted reflection of a drawn circle in a rippling puddle of water.
Yeah.
It's barely a circle at all.
Got it. Then we move up to stage 2, belief. This is where we look at concrete physical objects, animals, trees, buildings. But we still lack any deeper abstract understanding. We just accept that the physical things we see are the ultimate reality.
Right.
So in our circle example, this is looking at a physical circle drawn in the fan with a stick. It's better than the reflection in the puddle, but the lines are thick and imperfect.
Exactly. Now, illusion and belief make up the visible realm. To cross over the dividing line into the intelligible realm, we hit stage 3, abstract reasoning. This is a massive cognitive leap.
So this is where we start doing math, right? We use sensory things like that imperfect circle in the sand, but we use it to reason toward abstract rules about all circles. We start calculating pi and radii.
Yes.
We're bridging to the abstract, but we're still relying on physical crutches to help our brains understand.
Exactly. You're using geometric models to reach systemic conclusions. But finally, at the absolute peak of the line, stage 4, we reach direct understanding, or pure dialectic.
This is where the mind completely abandons the physical world. No more drawings in the sand, no more visual aids.
None at all.
The mind ascends via pure logic to grasp the unhypothesized first principle, the form of the good. You comprehend the pure abstract concept of circularity that would exist even if the entire physical universe was destroyed. You see the total unified architecture of reality.
It is the highest pinnacle of human intelligence. But Plato knew that explaining abstract epistemology and geometry wouldn't really stick with the general audience.
Yeah, it's pretty dense.
So he translates this mathematical line into one of the most visceral narrative myths in human history, the allegory of the cave.
The cave. This is the one everyone has heard of, but mapping it directly onto the divided line makes it so much more powerful.
It really does.
Imagine a deep underground cave. Human beings have been chained there by their legs and necks since childhood. They can't move. They can only stare straight ahead at the back wall of the cave.
And behind them, higher up, is a massive fire.
Right, and between the fire and the prisoners, there is a raised walkway where people are walking by carrying puppets, statues of animals, and various objects.
And the firelight casts shadows of those puppets onto the wall in front of the prisoners. Because they have been chained there their entire lives, those shadows represent the only reality the prisoners have ever known.
It's their whole world.
Exactly. Their entire culture, their language, their games, their systems of honor are all dedicated to observing and predicting the sequences of these passing illusions. This maps directly to the bottom of the divided line. Illusion.
It's like being trapped inside a social media algorithm your entire life. You think the trending topics, the viral outrage, and the curated feeds are the entire universe when really you're just staring at shadows cast by tech companies.
Oh, that's a chillingly accurate modern comparison.
But then the allegory shifts. One prisoner is forcibly unchained. He is turned around and dragged up this steep, rugged ascent toward the exit of the cave. And the text emphasizes that this is an excruciatingly painful transition.
It is a violent awakening. When the prisoner is dragged out of the cave, the blinding light of the true physical sun induces vertigo. His eyes, accustomed only to darkness, are searing with pain. He is temporarily blinded.
He can't see anything at first.
No, he has to gradually adjust. First, he can only look at shadows on the ground. Then, reflections of trees in the water, which maps to abstract reasoning. And finally, after a long struggle, his eyes adjust enough to lift his gaze and look directly upon the sun itself. He reaches direct understanding.
He sees that the sun is the source of the seasons, the light, and everything in the world. He finally understands reality. But here is the tragedy of the whole system.
The hardest part.
Yeah, this is where Plato's structural genius really kicks in. Enlightenment is not a vacation. The philosopher doesn't get to just chill outside in the sunshine and enjoy their cosmic understanding.
Not at all.
They have a strict, absolute moral obligation to go back down into the dark cave.
The return. Upon returning to the underground, the philosopher's eyes are no longer accustomed to the dark. They stumble around.
They probably look like an idiot to the others.
Yeah, they do. When they try to compete in the prisoner's games of predicting shadows, they look foolish. They can't see the illusions clearly anymore because their minds are attuned to higher truths. And the remaining prisoners look at this stumbling philosopher and mock them.
The prisoners think the outside world ruined the guy's eyesight. They think enlightenment is a disease. They resolve that if anyone else tries to unchain them and drag them upward toward the light, they will seize him and execute him.
Which is a direct, heartbreaking historical allusion to the citizens of Athens executing Socrates for trying to educate them.
Exactly. And the core takeaway here is a concept that redefines learning. Education, for Plato, is not simply inserting facts into an empty brain, like putting sight into blind eyes.
No, it's much harder than that.
Education is the painful process of forcibly turning the whole soul around. You have to turn away from the comforting twilight of illusions and face the blazing, uncomfortable light of true being.
But I know you're going to push back on the return.
I am, because I have to ask, why force the philosopher to go back down? If they've done the grueling work, if they've reached the highest plane of existence and found genuine happiness, isn't it unbelievably cruel to chain them back to the ship of fools? Why not let them enjoy the light they fought so hard to reach?
Well, if we look back at the overarching architecture of Kallipolis, to the principle of speculation, the necessity of the return makes perfect logical sense.
How so?
The perfect city only works if the enlightened share the burden of rule. Leaving the philosopher in the sun makes that one individual supremely happy, yes, but it damns the entire collective state to be ruled by the ignorant crew from the ship of state.
I see.
The city provided the stability and the education that allowed the philosopher to escape the cave in the first place. Therefore, they owe a debt to the city. They must return and govern, not because they want power, but because they are the only ones who don't want it.
Structural unity over individual comfort. It's a harsh, demanding truth. The leaders must be the people who hate leading. So the philosopher is forced back into the cave to rule. But here's the tragedy. Even with a perfect philosopher king at the helm, Plato admits this utopia is doomed.
Everything decays.
Right, because Kallipolis is built in the physical world, and in Plato's philosophy, anything physical inevitably rots. How does a perfect society die?
Having established the absolute pinnacle of structural perfection, Plato dedicates books 8 and 9x to tracking its agonizing systemic degeneration. He outlines 4 specific stages of regime collapse.
He shows exactly how the lower elements of the psyche gradually, generation by generation, usurp control from reason. It is a pathology of decay.
It's like watching a perfectly healthy, athletic body slowly succumb to a terminal disease.
Let's walk through these 4 stages in detail because the psychological friction between the generations is incredibly recognizable today. The perfect aristocracy falls, and we enter stage 1, democracy. How does the gold rest?
Well, the fall doesn't begin with an invading army or a natural disaster. It begins with a microscopic math error.
Wait, really?
Yeah.
Math.
Yes. The ideal aristocracy falls because the rulers eventually make a mistake in calculating the eugenic nuptial number. They pair the wrong people together at the wrong cosmic times.
Oh, wow. So the system just fails itself.
Exactly. This genetic error leads to a breakdown in the purity of the classes. Gold mixes with silver and bronze. And when that psychological mutation happens, the spirited element of the soul, the aggressive, honor-loving part, overthrows reason.
So the auxiliaries, the soldiers, basically enact a quiet coup. The timocratic state is born. It becomes obsessed with military honor, athletic competition, and victory. Reason is no longer in charge of the state. Pride is.
Yes.
Think of a society entirely focused on winning medals and dominating rivals. The timocratic man is proud, he is harsh to his inferiors, and he is driven by an intense, burning desire for personal distinction. It's a society of warriors, not philosophers.
But honor is a volatile foundation, and honor doesn't generate wealth indefinitely. Over time, the love of military victory covertly shifts into a love of material accumulation.
The fierce warrior realizes he likes gold more than he likes medals.
Exactly. Which leads us to stage 2, oligarchy.
The constitution alters. Property qualifications arise. The rulers pass laws stating that you can only hold political office if you have a certain amount of money in the bank. Power is now restricted exclusively to the rich.
The military heroes are replaced by bankers and tycoons.
And we must look at what happens internally, in the soul of the oligarchic man. The calculating appetites take over.
Right. The son of the timocratic warrior watches his father lose his wealth or be disgraced in politics, and the son becomes terrified of poverty.
He swings to the opposite extreme.
Yes, he suppresses his wilder lusts. He doesn't party, he doesn't drink, but not out of virtue. He suppresses them because he's terrified of losing his capital. He becomes a miser.
He views every interaction purely through the lens of profit.
And on a macro scale, the city splits into 2 deeply hostile, warring factions living in the same space. The ultra-rich hoarders and the destitute, resentful poor.
A society fundamentally divided by massive wealth inequality is a powder keg. The rich keep squeezing the poor, charging high interest, foreclosing on homes, until the tension simply snaps, which triggers stage 3, democracy.
The impoverished masses finally reach their breaking point and revolt against the ruling oligarchy. They expel or execute the rich. Democracy emerges.
And Plato characterizes this democratic state by its 2 driving forces: absolute unrestrained freedom and absolute equality.
Now, to modern ears, freedom and equality sound like the goal.
Yeah, that sounds great to us.
But remember, Plato's definition of justice, staying in your lane. In Plato's democracy, there are no lanes. The structural hierarchy is completely obliterated. All appetites, both necessary like eating to survive and unnecessary like eating decadent pastries just for pleasure, are treated with equal moral weight.
The state becomes what Plato calls a multicolored coat, beautiful and vibrant on the surface, but lacking any underlying structural integrity or expertise. Anyone can steer the ship.
And the psychological profile of the democratic man is a fascinating critique of unchecked liberty. The son of the miserly oligarch rebels against his father's stinginess. He decides all desires are equally valid.
He lives day to day, indulging whatever whim happens to seize him. The source description of this guy is hilariously accurate.
It really is.
It says, he drinks heavily one day while listening to the flute, then fasts and drinks only water the next. He hits the gym for a week, then gets lazy and does nothing. Then he decides to dabble in philosophy for a bit, then he jumps into politics and gives wild speeches.
It sounds exactly like a modern gig economy worker.
Yeah.
Doom scrolling from whim to whim, trying on different identities, constantly distracted.
He confuses license with liberty, and he confuses anarchy with equality. He has no internal compass.
But this absolute, unstructured freedom creates a dangerous psychological vacuum. When every impulse is treated as equal, there's no mechanism to suppress the truly dark desires.
You're right.
Which leads inevitably to the final fatal stage. Stage 4, tyranny.
The insatiable thirst for freedom actually triggers its own destruction. The text says, extreme liberty breeds extreme subjection. Let's dig into that mechanism. How does a society obsessed with freedom willingly hand itself over to a dictator?
It happens out of fear and chaos. To manage the unruly masses and protect themselves from the remaining factions of the rich oligarchs who want their money back, the democratic people seek out a champion. A charismatic populist emerges.
He claims to be the sole protector of the common people. He promises to fix everything. He promises to punish the elites.
Yes. But once he is elevated, this champion gradually consolidates absolute power. He demands a personal bodyguard. He instigates unnecessary foreign wars to keep the populace distracted and dependent on his leadership.
He purges anyone who might challenge him, even his former allies.
Exactly. He eventually transforms from a protector into a ruthless, paranoid tyrant.
And what happens inside the tyrant's soul? Because this entire giant city experiment was built to answer Glaucon's challenge about the Ring of Gyges.
Right, going all the way back to book 2.
The tyrant has achieved the ultimate dream of Thrasymachus. He has absolute power. He can kill his enemies, take whatever wealth he wants, and everyone bows to him. Is he happy?
Plato argues the exact opposite. He paints a horrifying picture of the tyrannical soul. Inside the tyrant's mind, a singular, monstrous, unnecessary, and unlawful desire, often symbolized by uncontrollable, erotic lust or absolute paranoia, usurps the entire psychic apparatus.
So he's not in control at all.
The tyrant is not the master of the city. He is the ultimate slave to his own darkest passions. Because he has betrayed everyone, he can trust no one. He is surrounded by flatterers but has no true friends. He lives in a permanent state of terror, isolation, and spiritual misery. He's a prisoner in his own palace.
So Plato finally completely answers the challenge. He proves that the just man, governed by reason, whose internal hierarchy is aligned, is structurally integrated and happy. Even if he's being tortured on a cross, his soul is impenetrable. But the unjust tyrant, even with all the wealth and power of the planet, even if he was wearing the Ring of Gyges, is a fragmented, wretched, paranoid slave to a monster inside his own head.
It is a profound, airtight psychological taxonomy. The tyrant's life is a living hell, masked by gold.
It's a brilliant narrative, but I am not letting Plato off the hook here. I have to push back on this progression from democracy to tyranny.
Fair enough.
Isn't Plato relying on a massive slippery slope fallacy? He basically argues that letting people have freedom, letting them try different jobs and express themselves equally, immediately and inevitably guarantees that a homicidal dictator will take over.
I know, it sounds extreme.
That feels like a paranoid authoritarian leap. It implies that ordinary people are incapable of self-governance without a dictator ruling them.
It is a very common and valid critique. Plato's hostility toward democracy is heavily influenced by watching democratic Athens execute his mentor, Socrates.
That makes sense. It's personal for him.
Very personal. But if we examine the psychological mechanism he's warning about, rather than just the political one, his argument actually holds water. Plato is arguing that without an internal hierarchy of values, without reason firmly steering the ship and telling you no, sometimes you create a moral vacuum.
A moral vacuum.
If a society or an individual mind decides that all desires are equally valid, there is no defense mechanism when a truly destructive desire arises. The loudest, most aggressive, most monstrous passion will eventually ruthlessly exploit that vacuum. The tyrant takes over the city exactly the same way addiction takes over a completely unrestrained mind.
The monster always fills the void if reason isn't guarding the door. That is a terrifying thought.
It really is.
And having proved that justice is the structurally healthier choice in this physical life, the text doesn't stop there. Plato brings out his grand finale. He scales the camera back even further, extending this logic beyond the physical world out into eternity itself.
Yes, the entire intellectual journey of the Republic concludes in Book X with a massive eschatological climax, the myth of
The myth of So is a Pamphylian soldier who is killed in battle. But 12 days later, as his body is lying on the funeral pyre, he suddenly wakes up.
A near-death experience, basically.
Exactly. And he describes in vivid detail what he saw in the afterlife while he was dead.
Describes a profound cosmic sorting mechanism. Souls are judged after death, the unjust are sent under the earth to suffer tenfold for their crimes, and the just are sent into the heavens to experience unimaginable joy.
Okay, pretty standard afterlife stuff so far.
Right. But the critical climax of the myth occurs after this period of reward or punishment. All the souls are gathered together in a meadow at the center of the universe, at a place called the Spindle of Necessity.
The Spindle of Necessity. This is where souls have to choose their next reincarnated life before returning to Earth. The fates lay out a vast array of human and animal destinies on the ground. You could choose to be a wealthy king, a famous athlete, a humble farmer, or even a swan. The order in which the souls get to walk up and choose is determined by a random lottery. But the choice itself, which life you actually pick to live next, requires profound philosophical wisdom to get right.
And to illustrate the ultimate stakes of his philosophy, Plato has tell the story of the very first soul whose lot is drawn.
The guy who gets to pick first.
Right. This soul had just come down from heaven. He had lived a superficially virtuous life in a well-ordered, just city in his previous incarnation. But crucially, he had been virtuous out of mere habit and societal pressure, not out of deep philosophical understanding.
So this is a guy who was generally decent just because it was the social norm. He didn't steal because his parents told him not to, and the laws were strict. He was a good person on autopilot.
Yes. And because he wins the lottery and gets the very first choice, he looks at all the lives scattered on the ground and he hastily grabs the most glamorous-looking one available, the life of the greatest, wealthiest tyrant.
Of course he does. He is completely dazzled by the external wealth and the absolute power. But because his previous goodness was just a habit, because he lacks the philosophical training to evaluate the inner structural layout of the soul model he just chose, he entirely misses the fine print.
He doesn't look closely enough.
No. Once he locks in his choice, he examines the destiny closely, and he realizes to his absolute horror that his new life as a tyrant involves a fate where he is destined to eat his own children.
It's just a horrifying realization.
He eats his own children. That is so incredibly dark. So a guy who was basically a good citizen in his past life, the very second he is given absolute freedom at the cosmic spindle to choose whatever he wants, turns into a cannibalistic tyrant.
That's the story.
Is Plato seriously saying that being a normal, law-abiding, good person out of habit is practically useless unless you have spent your life studying hardcore philosophy?
That is exactly what he is saying. The expert insight here is that untested, unreasoned virtue is incredibly fragile. Habitual goodness only works when society is holding your hand and enforcing the rules.
When the cops are watching.
Right. But when external societal constraints are completely removed, whether by the invisibility of the ring of Gyges while you are alive, or the absolute freedom at the spindle of necessity when you are dead, only a structurally harmonized soul, guided by reason, will survive.
Habitual goodness fails when tested by true power.
Precisely. In the myth, the soul of the true philosopher who has spent their life training their reason doesn't rush. Even if they draw the last lottery ticket, they meticulously evaluate the inner mechanics of the remaining choices.
They don't just grab the shiny one.
No, they ignore the flashy tyrannies and the famous athletes, and they deliberately pick a quiet, obscure, but fundamentally just life. Because they know that internal harmony is the only true source of happiness.
That is the ultimate warning. Philosophy isn't just a puzzle for academics. It is an absolute survival skill.
It really is.
What a journey this has been. I mean, we started with the cynical challenge of the Ring of Gyges, wondering if morality is just a fear of getting caught.
Right.
To answer it, we zoomed out and built the radically engineered, hyper-empathetic, terrifying utopia of Kallipolis. We dragged ourselves out of the dark cave to stare at the blinding, objective sun of the good. We watched the tragic, generational decay of the human soul as reason surrendered to the tyrant of appetite.
And finally, we stood at the cosmic spindle of necessity.
To realize that our eternal fate depends entirely on whether we know how to steer our own minds.
It is a masterful, sweeping diagnosis of the human condition. It demands that we stop living on autopilot.
And for you listening, navigating a modern world that is constantly trying to distract you, the takeaway here is incredibly intimate. Avoiding information overload isn't just about turning off your phone. It's about figuring out who is actually steering the ship inside your own head.
That's the real question.
Are you ruled by reason, navigating by the stars? Or are your appetites and your pride constantly mutinying for the helm while the ship crashes into the rocks?
I want to leave the listener with one final, lingering thought built directly from the source material. Right before Plato introduces the myth of he launches a final, severe critique against imitative poetry and art.
Oh, interesting.
He argues that art is an epistemological threat because it traps the human mind in the lowest possible level of cognition illusion. Art plays on our raw, irrational emotions rather than our reason, making us weep for fictional characters while ignoring our own reality.
He thought ancient theater and poetry were dangerous illusions that kept people chained to the wall of the cave, staring at shadows.
Yes. So imagine for a moment what Plato would think of our modern world. We are surrounded by algorithms, virtual reality, deepfakes, and endlessly scrolling curated content flooding our screens every single second of every single day.
Oh, wow,
We
yeah.
carry glowing screens in our pockets that feed us a constant stream of emotionally manipulative shadows. It begs a profound question.
Hmm.
Are we actively building a deeper, darker, and infinitely more seductive cave for ourselves today?
It is heavy.
And if we are willingly chaining ourselves to this new wall, who are the puppeteers casting those shadows?
Who are the puppeteers casting the shadows on your screen? That is a terrifying, brilliant place to end. Think of the tangled yarn projected on the wall and ask yourself whose hands are pulling the strings. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep your reason at the helm, don't let the appetites mutiny, and we will see you next time.